Namaskar. This is Divyanshi Srivastava welcoming you to this very interactive session brought to you by Pratha, a social media offshoot of Kavi Varsha. And in today's session, we'll be talking a much sensitive issue, which has been less talked by global media, but it is of great importance. Before coming directly to the topic, I would like to highlight a few statistics in front of you. Hindu population of Bangladesh in 1951 was 22.05%, which was reduced to 8.54% till 2011, according to the census report. The rate of exodus, religious persecution, and discrimination results to over 230,612 Hindus leaving the nation annually. And with the current rate of exodus, there will be no Hindus left in Bangladesh in 30 years from now. Government grabbed the properties of the Hindus during the Pakistan regime and describing them as enemy property, and the same properties were taken by Bangladesh government after independence as vested property. And to discuss on this very sensitive issue, we have with us Dr. Richard Benkin, a renowned American human rights activist, journalist, writer, and lecturer. He has been conferred with Special US Congressional Recognition 2005, Special Recognition 2007, Bangladesh Editors Forum. He has been essential in US foreign policies in Bangladesh. And today we'll be talking on the theme of his book, A Quiet Case of Ethnic Cleansing. Welcome, sir, to Pratha.
Namaskar. And Dhanyavad, thank you for having me.
We are very glad, sir, that you could join us today and to discuss on very sensitive issues. So, the beginning of the session, as I've highlighted few statistics, I would humbly request you to briefly shed a light on religious atrocities and exodus of Hindu population of Bangladesh, the scenario under Pakistan regime and post 1971 independence. Uh, if you can unmute yourself, sir, you are mute right now.
I knew I'd have a problem doing that. My fault, pardon me. Thank you, Divyanshi. I have to tell you that my work really focuses on the period of Bangladesh. Pakistan, well, you know, one of the problems that we have is the entire world knows what Pakistan is. Even those who don't say it know what Pakistan is. But people are a little more timid talking about Bangladesh. So there's no point in my talking about how terrible Pakistan was to Hindus, because they still are. But speaking about Bangladesh, actually, our figures differ a bit. But that's okay, because reliable figures are not easy to come by in Bangladesh. I had more like 30% at 1951, and the figure you gave is a little less than what I have for 1971 after Bangladesh's independence. And that's a very important marker, of course, because if we want to focus on what Bangladesh is doing and what they should do, it's good to know where they started from. But very correct. I think you said in 2011, it was like 8.5. I think the population was like 8.54%. I have more like 7.5, but that's today. All that shows us is that we're both seeing the same thing. The Hindu population is being reduced dramatically. It's still going on as from the change from 2011 to today. The problem is not just the atrocities. Of course, they're horrible enough. The problem is that they are enabled by the government of Bangladesh, and they have been ever since the very beginning. Those who claim that it was different with Sheikh Mujib are wrong. Things were going on then too that were not friendly to Hindus. Also, immediately after independence, I believe the process was completed in 1974. So this was during the reign of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. one of the things the new Bangladeshi parliament did was they took the laws under which East Pakistan operated, the laws of Pakistan, and they went through them, and they decided which are laws that Bangladesh should adopt as its own, and which laws must be discarded because they reflect Pakistani values. It is very interesting that if you look at Pakistan's Enemy Property Act, the new Bangladeshi government took that law word for word, from Pakistan to Bangladesh. They only changed the name from Enemy Property Act to Vested Property Act. And I believe that tells us an awful lot about the thinking of Bangladeshi leaders going back to Sheikh Modi. Now, it's much worse now because under his daughter, Sheikh Hasina, Bangladeshis are living in a state of near tyranny. And I have heard that time and again by people on the streets in Bangladesh. And Divyanshi, it doesn't matter if they're Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, if they're atheists, they're all saying the same thing. It doesn't matter if they're BNP people or Awami League people. Even some high judicial and elected officials have said the same thing about the state in Bangladesh. So the big problem is that Bangladesh will not prosecute and punish the perpetrators. Oh, when it gets too loud and the international community might hear, they might make some arrests, but one, they never arrest the organizers. They always arrest the small fry who were paid to participate in this. And even then, they bring him in the front door, and after the heat has cooled down, they let him out the back door. They just don't punish people. And so everyone in Bangladesh knows that you can commit crimes against Hindus in the Hindu community and the Hindu religion, and nothing will happen to you. That is the critical sin of the government of Bangladesh.
As you correctly pointed out, the scene with Bangladesh government, I want to understand the scenario. Has the global community in general and India in particular been successful in pressurizing the Bangladesh government to ensure the complete independence of its minority? And if not, what has been the reason for the same?
Well, clearly it hasn't, because Bangladesh is continuing to do what it wants. It's continuing to patronize a particular vote bank in Bangladesh because they do not get pressure from the international community. There is an occasional statement or resolution coming from one or another country, but nothing with teeth in it. Don't know. They have not done it. The international human rights industry have not done it. The organizations in each country that are supposed to monitor this have not done it. So no, they've not done it, and we know this because it's continuing. India, in particular, is an important country in this, because if India isn't saying anything about it, and India is, after all, the greatest Hindu population in the world, the country most closely associated with Hinduism. If they're not complaining, if they don't think it's so bad, why should anyone else? And that's a real problem. So and it's so easy to pressurize Bangladesh because they're so dependent on everyone else. But that's for another question. The fact is, no, it hasn't been. Now, why? I think, one, other countries look at India and say, well, geez, if India doesn't think it's that bad, I guess it's not that bad, because, one, they got a lot of Hindus there, and two, they're right next door. So if they don't think it's that bad, I guess those of us in Europe and America don't need to chime in because the Indians know better. That's one reason. Another reason is, another reason is that most people around don't really care about Bangladesh. They consider Bangladesh a not very important country. If you think about the partition of 1947, it was India, Pakistan, then Pakistan broke into Pakistan, Bangladesh. When presidents of the United States, I'm thinking of George Bush, Clinton, maybe not Bill Clinton, George Bush, when they go to South Asia, they go to India, then they go to Pakistan, but they don't go to Bangladesh. That's right, Bill Clinton also went to India, but not Bangladesh. Bangladesh is not considered very important. Now, I think that's a big mistake, obviously. And so let me say this, I work pretty extensively with members of US Congress and Senate. And of course, I push very hard for this issue. And we're making a lot of progress. However, what I do know is this. Those legislators, and then you can expand this to include other people in other countries around the world who might do something, they are bombarded with people coming to them every day about this atrocity or that atrocity. The important thing is to be able to explain why the atrocity you're talking about is important to them. And there are a lot of ways that we're doing that, and I can get into that as we go further. But that's the second thing. Bangladesh is just not considered important, especially when people are bombarded with all these other atrocities. I mean, what makes the news right now? Rohingyas, the Uyghurs, at another point it was Yazidis, but Bangladesh, not much. That's the second reason. Third reason, and I will ask my audience here to forgive me, but I'm basing this on 20 years of experience. The other problem, which I personally consider the biggest problem, is lack of interest or activism by the Hindu community, not just India, but by the international Hindu community, which of course is a huge and important community. It's the third largest religion in the world. But there has not been activism by the Hindu community. I'll give you an example of that. When I first started speaking to people in Washington about this, I'll use one congressman in particular, but this is similar to what I heard from others. I had worked there before. I had worked with them before, and they knew I'm very, very rigorous in validating anything I present, any evidence. So I came to them and I talked about this situation and said, this is terrible. And we're talking about, in the early 2000s, I was saying Hindus will be gone from Bangladesh if we don't do something. Anyway, so I remember going to congressmen, and I remember one in particular said to me, Richard, we believe you. We know the kind of information you gather. We believe what you say. However, we have to ask you, if the situation is as dire as you say it is, why do we hear nothing from our Hindu constituents? Why aren't they coming to us and telling us about this? And it's a real problem. Unfortunately, I've been able to overcome it to a certain extent, and we've seen a little bit of activism recently. Hindu American Foundation is getting much more involved in this, and I really want to take the opportunity to commend and praise Hindu American Foundation and their leaders. They are really taking the lead in this, and this is excellent. But that is a very big problem: the lack of Hindu activism. Because again, if you look at it, it's a huge population, and you'd think, geez, if this was an important issue, some part of it, some of those 1.1 billion people will say something. But that really doesn't happen.
I think I think there is some network connectivity issue with Dr. Richard's end. So we'll just wait for a while. I think there was some network connectivity issue, but no worries. Sarah's back with us. And a very important point that you highlighted is Uh, can you hear me now, sir?
Yes, but I wanted to make one more point, if I might, Divyanshi.
Absolutely,
Might I?
absolutely. Yes.
Dhanyavad. The other issue, and I think this is one that has not been acknowledged all by anyone except by a few people, including Hindu American Foundation, by the way. The other issue is I believe that there is an inherent bigotry against non-Abrahamic faiths. I'm talking about in the West, and particularly against non-Abrahamic faiths that are not the original one, the one I belong to, Judaism. But I just don't think those people in the West. I'm not talking about the population in general. I'm talking about the people in these organizations, governmental and otherwise. They don't see Hinduism the same way they see Christianity and Islam. They don't see Judaism the same way they see Christianity and Islam. But I think that's a problem. But I think, if we really want to talk about why, you got to look at the whole thing. I mean, if Hindus were pushing and saying, how dare you? How dare you consider my faith less legitimate than yours? I think that would make a difference. I will say, again, one of the fact that, number one, the fact that the Hindu population in the United States keeps growing means that it becomes more and more important to our elected leaders in Washington. And that's something we should be able to work with in the coming years. There's something else I'll talk about. I think it's more appropriate for another question, but please go on.
This is a wonderful explanation, and the very important point that you have highlighted is whatever scenarios we consider, but unless and until the international Hindu community do not come together and look for the atrocities and exodus of the Hindu population, whatever efforts are there, that's going to be in vain. So it's the time for awakening of the international Hindu community in general. And since we are talking about the international community, I would like to talk about, as initially I've pointed out one of the statistics, so I'll put it again in front of the audience. The Hindu population of Bangladesh, as stated, has reduced from 22% in 1951 to 8.54% in 2011. As per the few reports from Dhaka University, there won't be any Hindus left in Bangladesh in the next few decades. Yet the issues gets less highlighted in the international media as compared to the other extrapolated coverage of few cases in secular democracies to paint them as complete Islamophobic regimes. What must have been the reason for this minimal coverage on Hinduphobia in general? And what do you see the role of India can play in this regard? Of course, I'm stating that point. I'm sorry, but I'm stating that point, the earlier point, that the awakening of international Hindu community needs to be there. But if you talk about the global media,
Okay. Well, no, don't apologize. You're absolutely right. You are 100% correct. But yeah, again, there's 1.1 billion potential activists there. And I believe you were asking why this is not, why. Well, I think a lot of it is a lot of it is ideology, is politics. And we know that a lot of, there's an assumption, which is incorrect. I know it's incorrect on my part, to apply it to me. There's an assumption that to be for Hindu rights, you must be a leftist. And the narrative surrounding Hindus, and certainly surrounding the current government of India, which I think, by the way, is great government. It's a lot better than the last one that I experienced. But there is an ideological problem with that right there. So I think that's one thing. I think what should the international Hindu community do is you have to break the religious association. Look, if I like Modi, but if someone doesn't like Modi, that's their opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. But what I don't do is say, well, I like Modi. Well, that's the reason why I like Hindus. I like Hindus for so many reasons. That's not the reason. Or to say, if I don't like Modi, if someone doesn't like Modi, they don't like him. You have to break the association. And I'll give you an example of how that's happened. recently, and it's had a tremendous impact. Most people have heard of the Abraham Accords between Israel and the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, Sudan, and there'll be more. But what that did, see, all those countries are Muslim majority countries, I mean, like 99% Muslim in some cases. By making peace with Israel, they were saying this has nothing to do with our religions. This only has to do with what is correct geopolitically and what will benefit the people of our country, which I believe every government must think of first. And so they broke that. And as a result of that, the arguments that try and turn the Middle East into a religious conflict many times fall on deaf ears. It's still there. But many times, because if, like, for instance, I defended a Muslim in Bangladesh who was arrested, tortured for urging relations with Israel. Every time, well, not often, when someone is charged with a crime like blasphemy, they don't call it exactly that. They also charge with treason. In other words, there's a link between the state and the religion. I have to break that. And I think the only way to break that, in this case, is basically keep pressing the issue. Because the issue has nothing to do with religion, except to the extent that some people are persecuting Hindus because of their religion. The issue is what is happening to these people. How do we stop these atrocities? That's it. It shouldn't matter what the people's religions are. So I think that must be it. And you know, there are large Hindu populations, as I'm sure you know, in so many countries. I work with so many Hindu groups and Hindu populations here in the United States that are getting more and more influential here. That's what we have to do, because those elected officials will not purposely anger large vote banks.
Sir, a few time before we were discussing about the stand of Bangladesh government on this regard, the exodus of Hindu population from Bangladesh. But a lot of times, many things government take a lot of stands depending upon the foreign policy, under the pressure of foreign policy and their relation with other nations. So, in this regard, I want to understand, as per demographic studies from 1941 to 2001, over 49 million Hindus are missing from Bangladesh. So we would request you to share your findings on this regard and what has been the stand of government of Bangladesh on the programs, land grabs, and religious persecution, and what have they done? Because statistics, more or less, is in general with the global media.
Again, you're absolutely correct. And a good friend of mine, former Congress, he's now in the private sector, former Congressman Bob Dole, made a speech on the floor of Congress that said exactly that about the 49 million, and he was using my information. So we certainly see the same thing. And that was several years ago, so you know there are many more. Now, the demographic studies, by the way, just to be clear, they include people who were killed, who should be there, but also people who would have been born and would have been part of the population of Hindus in Bangladesh if their parents weren't forcibly converted or if they didn't have to flee to other countries. So, yes, that is a terrible situation. Now, what is the stance of the government of Bangladesh? As I said, the worst thing about it is that they refuse to prosecute those people who organize, fund, or commit these crimes. In Bangladesh, if you commit a crime against a Hindu, unless it's something that gains international attention and becomes an issue at the UN or something, if you commit a crime against a Hindu in Bangladesh, you'll be okay. Nothing will happen to you. And I've seen this. I've seen this directly. And I've seen it again and again and again and again. So the position of the government of Bangladesh, whether it's Awami League, military, BNP, Sheikh Mujib, or anyone else, that the position is that crimes against Hindus in Bangladesh are not to be treated as crimes. And I've also spoken with police in cities, in villages, Awami people, BNP people. Police have told me again and again and again, they are not allowed to prosecute these crimes. They have been told by people upstairs. So that's one element of it. A lot of times when I'm in Bangladesh and I see an atrocity, I see a crime, and I go to the police about that crime, they say, oh, this is nothing to do with religion. This is just a street crime. I remember one time in 2018, 2019, I was at Dhaka University and got a phone call in the evening that a home had been vandalized. Turned out, by the time they called me, the damage had been done. And but we got there, and I was there with my dear friend, my brother, Rabindra Ghosh, who is he is my great colleague in Bangladesh. So he and I went there, and we saw the damage. The place was completely trashed, everything about it. And there was, including the prayer room, everything was trashed. The deities, everything smashed. Fortunately for the people, they were able to escape. And so nothing happened to them. We met them because they had come back there too. Anyway, so we saw these things. So Rabindra Ghosh and I went to the police, the officer in charge, and we reported and said, "What are you doing about this?" And he said, "Well, this is a crime like any other. It's not a religion." So I looked at the officer in charge and I said, but then tell me, if this is just a regular crime, why did I see your intelligence people there? Do your intelligence people believe that you're incapable of solving crime, so they always come to crime scenes? Well, of course they don't. And it was an embarrassment for him because he expected, I'm just a stupid American, I don't know anything. But the fact is, we're not stupid. And I did know a lot. And I was able to see there were intelligent people there because this is ethnic cleansing. This is not a simple street crime. And finally, the other position of Bangladeshi government, which too many people fall for, they say, oh, this is not Bangladesh. We don't believe in this. It's just a group of radicals. They're the bad ones. It's just a group of radicals. But of course, that's not the case. If we're only radicals, it's too small of a population to do all this damage. And two, the radicals have been enabled and empowered, particularly by this Bangladeshi government.
We've been talking about the exceedings, the atrocities, and the missing of Hindu population. But what is the future of Hindu population in Bangladesh?
Well, I agree with Professor Abu Barkat at Dhaka University. If nothing changes, the Hindu population will be gone. Oh, there might be a small remnant there, I don't know. But he was talking before mid-century, which is getting closer and closer. And he was basing that, again, on demographics, on people fleeing the country, on the Hindu population being reduced through murder, forced conversion, and such as well. And by the way, Dr. Barkat, I believe, is a Muslim. So this is not a religious issue, and not all Bangladeshis believe that way. Anyhow, so I think, yes, one possibility is that we do nothing, and Hinduism goes away or becomes a very minor religion in Bangladesh. And what does that mean? That means forced conversion, murder, or exile. And by the way, in addition to India, and I've met a lot of refugees from Bangladesh and India, particularly in northern Bengal. In addition to that, I am a expert witness in asylum cases here in the United States. And I work on a lot of cases where the asylum seeker is a Hindu from Bangladesh who has been brutalized, has suffered a number of atrocities, and has not been able to get any kind of protection or relief from anyone in the Bangladeshi government, or from that matter, any Hindu organizations. And so they come requesting asylum, and I will be an expert witness on that. So my point is, I see a lot of people, not just fleeing to India, but fleeing to the United States, and I'm sure they're fleeing to other countries as well. So one possibility is that Hinduism will be gone. Second possibility is that there is that Hindu awakening, and those of us in the West And when we talk later, I'll tell you why I keep talking about the West. Those of us in the West, wake up and join you. And we fight this. And Hinduism remains a force in its ancestral homeland. But of course, it will always be battling these ethnic cleansers unless something is done. So it's going to be one or the other. Either they're going to be gone or they'll take a stand. If Hindus take a stand in Bangladesh, they have a very strong friend in me. I'm planning several efforts in Washington for Bangladeshi Hindus, and in Bangladesh itself, and in India. But there are some Indian Hindus, by the way, that have been recognizing this and doing some, particularly the Hindu Struggle Committee in Delhi. But anyhow, I think really it's one of two things: either you fight and survive, or you don't fight and you go away.
As you're talking about the awakening of Hindu population, so as you said that you would shed more light on awakening of the West. So I would like you to please talk about it.
Okay. First, I'm going to tell you why I keep talking about the West. It's not because I think the West, because, oh, we're so good, we're the West. No, not at all. That has nothing to do with it. Let's say we have to work in the real world. And in the real world, we have to know one thing. I can tell you this, I will swear on a stack of Bibles that I know the government of Bangladesh will never, ever, ever do the right thing in this, simply because it's the right thing to do. If we believe, well, let's try and make arguments to convince them that this is wrong and they should change, that'll never work, because we're not telling them anything they don't know. The Bangladeshi government will never do the right thing simply because it's the right thing. However, they might do the right thing if we make it contrary to their interests to continue doing the wrong thing. And this is why I keep talking about the West, because the Bangladeshi economy is inordinately dependent on one thing more than anything else, and that's their export of ready-made garments. If they have a problem with that, their economy crumbles. And let me tell you, no political leader in Bangladesh wants to be the political leader when the economy crumbles. Millions could be unemployed. It's terrible. And they are dependent on that, on their garment exports. And who's their biggest customer? The United States. Second biggest customer is Germany, another Western democracy. If, in fact, we recognize that what they're doing is wrong and we're not going to support this, we're not going to keep buying Bangladeshi garments when the money is used to commit ethnic cleansing on Hindus and also on other minorities, but particularly we're talking about Hindus here. That's important. If the government, I mean, I got to tell you, there are so many countries that would love that market. I've talked to them. They would love to be able to supply the United States with ready-made garments. But that's I talk about the West because the West controls their economy through garment purchases. Second thing that is critical to their economy that the West controls, they get millions of dollars every month for UN peacekeeping missions. Who funds peacekeeping missions? I do, and other U.S. taxpayers. We don't fund it 100%, but we fund the largest chunk by far of any nation in the world. I think China is second, and they fund like 9 or 10%. So if we say, look, we can't have a country sending troops overseas to keep the peace when they can't keep the peace at home. We can't give people funds that somehow are used to commit ethnic cleansing. This is a moral issue. And if we stand against it, that's another reason the West is important. I will also tell you something else. I was in Dhaka in 2007, and as I'm sure many of you know, there was a military coup in 2007. I was there during the coup. I got there a few days before, and I stayed there during the coup, and I stayed there a little bit after. And afterwards, I spoke with many of the military leaders who were involved, and they told me, when I got there, the Awami League was protesting against a proposed election. They said the BNP rigged it, which they probably did. Am I still visible? Because there. Okay. The BNP, rigged the election. The Awami League was protesting it. One Western democracy after another also agreed with the Awami League and went officially saying this is not going to be a fair election. The military, with all this happening, finally thought, if we are not considered a real democracy, the UN is going to reduce or eliminate our peacekeeping forces. And no one could stand that in Bangladesh, besides the millions of dollars a month they get. And I'm thinking millions of dollars, not millions of rupees or millions of taka, millions of dollars a month. Besides that, if the peacekeeping missions were canceled, we would be sending huge numbers of angry, unemployed, and armed men into the country. Now, no one's going to want that. So that was actually the reason that the final reason that they moved. So the point is, the West is important because we control those levers that control the Bangladeshi economy. So I think this is very important. Yes, I have worked with people in Europe, but my primary focus is the United States. And I can tell you this, and this is some good news. There is much more realization among people in the United States Congress and the Senate of what's happening in Bangladesh. Several of them have already started cooperating with me. And some of them, by the way, are on the House Committee on Ways and Means, which controls trade legislation. That's very important in Bangladesh. That's what my focus is. I can tell you right now, if anyone's been reading the news, knows that for a long time we've been having a lot of issues that seem to come first in the United States. And certainly the Biden administration, I agree with this, had said, even before it was elected, that its number one priority is eliminating the pandemic. And I think that has to be the case. We're all, so it takes a lot of work. And of course, right now I'm not traveling to Washington as often as I used to because of the pandemic. But we are seeing some people who are really ready to take action. I've got two different resolutions for Congress that I've prepared. One I've already sent to someone, one I will be sending to someone else, which they use as a basis to see for more. That has to be the case only because until those levers of the Bangladeshi economy are pulled, the Bangladeshi government is not going to do anything about this. Occasionally they'll make an arrest here or there when something becomes too hot for them to handle, but the person's not really punished, and of course many other crimes go unpunished. So that's why I focus on the West. I think two things that are happening now help. One is, as I said, the Hindu population of the United States keeps growing. And among that population, we're seeing more activism, particularly by the Hindu American Foundation, but by others as well. And I think if we organize that activity, we can have some real impact. And that's some of the things I'm doing. The other thing, as many of your audience probably know, over the last several years, Bangladesh has been making, at first surreptitious, but a little more open now, move towards China and away from the United States. Remember I mentioned earlier about how these congressmen and senators, they get inundated every day. Please, there's this atrocity. Please, there's that atrocity. And I don't mean to denigrate any of them. They're all so bad. It's so important that we end them all. Real atrocities, that is, that we end them all. But they're so inundated that you have to have a reason why one is more important than the other. And what is resonating with a lot of people in Washington is it's important because it's part of a nexus in Bangladesh that is now moving towards China, that's gotten very involved in Belt and Road, and is persecuting actually friends of mine who are trying to counter the Chinese moves in Bangladesh. So those two things, I hope, are leading to a change in U.S. policy and certainly in activity. We've got an election coming up in November. We'll have to see what happens then. But I think we'll see even more people who will be able to support us. But again, remember, there are other issues that are always going to come first. Because, like I said, whether it's a pandemic or we got a problem with crime or China or what have you. But I never stop because our enemies never sleep. Our enemies never stop. If we stop, if we sleep, we lose ground because they don't.
Very well pointed, sir. And during our conversation, you pointed very important issue that the exodus of Hindu population from Bangladesh. So, what is concerned is India's stand, and particularly Hindus in general. So, I would want to know and understand from you that a much talked Citizenship Amendment Act, which was passed by Indian Parliament, how it is going to affect on the exodus of Hindu population from Bangladesh.
Okay, I have to tell you something. I'm going to be very, very frank and honest about this. And if some people don't like it, I can't help it because my position has angered some. But here's what I believe. You remember with NRC-CAA, there were massive protests in India, also elsewhere. The common wisdom, which I don't think is very wise, the common wisdom is that this is an atrocity. This is contrary to India as a secular country, and this is prejudicial against Muslims. And by the way, I try not to make that distinction, Hindus, Muslims, because that doesn't really help. But that it's a terrible thing. That's what we hear again and again. It's a terrible thing. I don't think so. I think quite the opposite. Many, many years ago, I got to know Modi ji when he was chief minister in Gujarat. And I would come see him. And I would talk to him about what was happening in Bangladesh. Now, India was doing nothing about it. And I remember one time when I came there, I talked about the situation. He said, "Okay, doctor, tell me, what would you like me to do?" The question, I didn't think about this a whole lot until I saw CAA. Because what I said was, thank you, because he's really a wonderful person. Thank you, Modi ji. What you need to do is, if you ever become prime minister, is to make this a part of your foreign policy. Now, a couple things. Prime minister of a country, particularly a country of India, which is one of the great world powers, hopefully we'll eventually get a permanent seat on the Security Council, is a nuclear power. More than 1 billion people. A history that goes back thousands of years. There's so many things, and then also add the neighborhood where India is. We talk about the neighborhood where Israel is, right? The neighborhood where India is. When you think about all that, we must understand any prime minister. Oh, I'm sorry. One of the things I forgot to mention, the very diverse population. And remember, he is prime minister of all of India, not just one group or another. And he knows this, and he takes that very, very seriously. And so that's why perhaps he hasn't taken the kind of action we all would have liked. I know I would have liked to see that. But, and here's getting back to your question. People criticize the Citizenship Amendment Act. I don't understand that. It does nothing for Muslim citizens of India. It doesn't affect them at all. But what CAA is, it's the first time in history that the Indian government has officially said that Hindus are being persecuted in Bangladesh because it set India as a safe haven for persecuted Hindus in surrounding countries. And so it said Hindus are being persecuted in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Now that's a very, very important statement, because if Hindus are being persecuted there, well then there must be things that should be done about it. And we know CAA is one thing. Hindus who flee Bangladesh are going to, for flee that persecution, are going to be able to find some safe haven, and that's really important. So are others. I know a lot of Buddhists that are being persecuted in Bangladesh as well. Excuse me. The indigenous population, the Chakmas, near the Chittagong Hill Tracts, they're being persecuted. They all can find safe haven in India, and I think that sets India as one of the great places for human rights victims to go for help. Sure, India's got problems, so does the United States. We all have problems. India, not ignoring the problems it has. Those people who think it is just don't know. But the CAA, first time, it's official declaration by the government of India that Hindus are being persecuted in Bangladesh, and we can build on that. Because, again, if I go there, if I go to Washington, they say, well, why isn't India saying anything? Now I can say, well, India did say that this is going on. You can imagine the geopolitical forces it's got to face being in the area it is. Plus, Modi has been able to develop a decent relationship with Sheikh Hasina. So he's got to work that somehow. And I know he wants to somehow work that relationship so it helps the Hindus. But if he tells her she's an ethnic cleanser, maybe that breaks the relationship and he can't do anything for Hindus. I don't know. This is all beyond me. But the fact that through the CAA, India has said officially Hindus are persecuted in Bangladesh, that's something I can work with. I'd like to see more of that.
Thank you, Dr. Richard, for explaining us all the scenario, and it's very important to talk about because this issue is very sensitive, but much less talked by global media and international media, and much more ignored. So it's important that we talk about the ethnic cleansing of Bangladesh Hindus. Really very thankful to you, Dr. Richard, for joining us, and it was absolute pleasure to have you.
Well, thank you, Divyanshi. I will say this. I've been doing this since almost the turn of the millennium, not a little few years after I've been doing this, and yes, we've made some progress. We've been able to get some Hindus back land that was seized. We've stopped attacks. We've done certain things. And we've gotten some official proclamations, but there's so much more work we can do. And Hindus still are not safe. And when I think about that issue, I don't think about the issue. I try and think about individuals I've seen, desecrated mandirs, bodies of people who were killed and chopped up. Sorry. I think of the face of a Hindu mother telling me that her daughter was abducted, and can you please help me because the police won't. I think about a child that I met her in India. She had crossed over, she and her family had crossed from Bangladesh only 22 days before. And it took a while, but as they described the things that happened to them, turned out I think of this young girl who was gang raped by the same people who killed her uncle, who threw them off their property. They gang raped her. And I know that she's one of so many. So when I think about this issue, I think about those individuals. I ask myself, how could anyone not want to do something about
it? Definitely, and definitely, this issue is very, very sensitive, and the international community should come together. Although the less seems to be less traveled, but it's we who travel together on this road, and hopefully mend the situation someday.
Hopefully.
Thank.
One thing I would like to say, I always end my discussions with a question, and I want everyone in the audience, everyone who's listening, to take this question as it is addressed to them personally, directly. when this is all over, when we go back to doing what we're doing, when this is all over, each of us has to ask, what am I going to do about this? Because that's all that matters. This means nothing if it doesn't result in some kind of action. And that everyone who's here obviously is concerned one way or another about this. So you've got to ask yourself, what are you going to do about it? I know it doesn't matter how much I do. Every day I beat myself up saying, why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you being more effective? All of us have to measure ourselves by that one question alone and how we answer it. Because if we don't do something about it and we know about it, then shame on us. Are we any better than the people committing the actions if we say, yeah, we know about it, but it's okay? So ask yourself, what are you going to do about this when this seminar is over?
And we're ending this session with a very important question, and I'm reading that question that ask yourself what you're going to do about it, as Dr. Richard rightly pointed out. And it's very important for each and everybody's on our part to actually introspect that what are we going to do. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us,
Thank you,
and
man.
it was absolute
Namaskar.
pleasure. We wish you good health. Namaskar.
Namaskar.